Welcome. You're listening to the Keeping Ashland Healthy podcast, a podcast production of the Mental Health and Recovery Board of Ashland County, Ohio. Thanks for joining us.
When most of us think about farming, we picture green fields, red barns, and the steady rhythm of seasons. We imagine resilience, independence, and hard work. What we talk about far less is the quiet weight that many farmers carry, a weight shaped by weather they cannot control, markets that rarely feel fair, and a sense of responsibility that runs across generations. Today's episode is about farmer mental health, not as a problem to be fixed, but as a human story to be understood. We'll talk about stress, stigma, strength, and the kind of community that makes life more livable. We'll also ground this conversation in our board's three-legged framework, which is meaning and purpose, relationships and belonging, and the material conditions that shape everyday life. This is Keeping Ashland Healthy, and I'm your host, David Ross. Let's jump in. Farming is not just an occupation, it is an identity, a calling, and for many families, a multi-generational inheritance. In Ohio alone, more than 76,000 farms are family-owned, and over 130,000 men and women work in agricultural production. That inheritance is beautiful, and it's heavy. Imagine waking up every day knowing that your livelihood depends on forces beyond your control. Rainfall, drought, frost, supply chains, commodity prices, and rising input costs, among a few. A single storm can undo months of labor. A single market shift can put a farm in jeopardy. The land may be steady, but the economics around it are not. Research and farmer surveys consistently show that financial strain, unpredictable weather, and the pressure to keep a family farm viable are among the greatest stressors in agriculture. These are not abstract anxieties. They are practical, daily realities. Questions like, can I afford seed this year? Will this season be enough to keep the farm and the family? What happens if I fail? This is the first leg of our stool, material conditions. Mental health is inseparable from economics, labor, and the structures that shape rural life. When we talk about farmer mental health, we are also talking about farm policy, rural infrastructure, and access to support. Despite these pressures, though, farming culture often prizes toughness, self-reliance, and making do. There's deep honor in that ethic, but it can also create silence around emotional pain. Many farmers were raised with messages like, you don't complain, you push through, you handle your own problems. As a result, distress can feel personal failure, rather than a predictable human response to overwhelming circumstances. Let me say that again. As a result, distress can feel like personal failure rather than a predictable human response to overwhelming circumstances. Studies show that farmers are at significantly higher risk of suicide than the general population. Some estimates suggest as much as 3.5 times higher. This is not because farmers are weak. It is because they are often asked to be strong in impossible conditions and to carry that burden alone. Stigma does not just keep people from asking for help, it shapes how they interpret their own suffering. If a farmer believes, for instance, I should be able to handle this, then despair can become shame, and shame can deepen isolation. But stigma is not inevitable. It is cultural, which means it can change. It is crucial to say this clearly. Farmers are not only at risk, they also possess remarkable protective strengths. Our friends at the Ohio Suicide Prevention Foundation identified several protective factors in agricultural communities. Let me list them. A strong sense of purpose and identity, close family connections, deep community ties, adaptability and problem solving, connection to nature, connection to faith or spiritual communities. These are not sentimental traits. They are psychological and social lifelines. Meaning matters. For many farmers, caring for the land is not just work. It is a vocation. And we know the Latin behind that. It's a calling. That sense of purpose can anchor people through hardship. Relationships matter. When neighbors look out for one another, when families check in, when churches, cooperatives, and farm bureaus create spaces for connection, isolation loosens its grip and environment matters. Being connected to land, animals, and seasons can offer stability, rhythm, and perspective. This is the second leg of our stool, relationships and belonging. Traditional mental health services have not always been accessible or culturally aligned with farming communities. This is why creative, community-based approaches are so important. Some of the most promising efforts reach farmers in familiar spaces rather than clinical offices. All right, so rather than expecting folks to come to some of our provider offices, we can meet them at Farm Bureau meetings, commodity groups, agricultural conferences, sale barns, auctions where financial stress can peak. Partnerships with trusted professionals like vets, equipment dealers, and extension agents. Programs out there like Farm State of Mind and Got Your Back in Ohio State's Farm Stress Initiative are not just providing hotlines, they are normalizing conversations about mental health and agricultural spaces. This matters because help feels different when it comes from someone who understands your world. We've talked about that a lot on the program. At its core, this is about dignity. Farmers should not have to leave their identity at the door to receive care. Support should meet them in their context, not pull them out of it. Do you get that? Support should meet them in their context, not pull them out of it. So the philosophy here at the Mental Health and Recovery Board resists the idea that distress is simply a chemical problem inside an individual. We resist that strongly. Instead, we see mental and emotional pain as meaningful responses to real conditions. For farmers, distress often makes perfect sense given financial pressure. Financial pressure makes anyone anxious. Watching crops fail can break anyone's heart. Feeling alone can erode anyone's hope. This does not mean suffering should not be accepted. It does mean it should be understood, okay? So it doesn't mean suffering should be accepted. It means it should be understood. Context, okay? Healing, then, is not only about symptoms, it's about strengthening community ties, creating economic stability where possible, honoring farmers' identity and agency, building spaces where vulnerability is not seen as weakness. This is the third leg of our stool, meaning and agency. The belief that people are more than their struggles and that they can grow, adapt, and find purpose even in hardship. So what can we do about this? If you are a farmer listening today, you do not have to carry everything alone. Asking for help is not a betrayal of your independence. It is an act of care for yourself, your family, and your land. If you are part of the farming community, I ask you to check in on one another. Notice when somebody seems withdrawn, exhausted, or overwhelmed. A simple, how are you really doing, can open a door. And if you are part of the broader community, support policies, programs, and partnerships that invest in rural mental health, economic stability, and community connection. The health of our farms is tied to the health of our farmers. The health of our farmers is tied to the health of our communities. So before I bring in our special guest, I just want to say, if you or someone you know is struggling, you can call our local helpline, 419-289-6111. It's a wonderful resource. Local people that know our communities can direct you. You could also call or text 988, which is the regional number. You'll get a regional person. They may not know as much as our local person, but 988 is easy to remember. If you're in Ohio, local resources such as Farm State of Mind and Got Your Back are also available. And again, we're going to put links to all of this in our episode description. But I'm telling you, when I talk about these issues, it's always best to bring in somebody who knows something more, somebody that is doing the work, something, a perspective of an individual who is there. And Connie Butler, a board member and somebody who's been in the farming community for years, will be my special guest, and she'll be coming up next. So I'm very excited. Joining me in the studio is board member, but much more than just a board member, our own Connie Butler. So Connie, please reintroduce yourself to the audience before we really dive into this discussion.
Okay, my name is Connie Butler. I'm a social worker, have lived in this area all my life. I currently work part-time at the hospital and for Fresenius Kidney Care. I live on my family farm, which is going on 6 generations.
Wow.
And hopefully to pass that on to my boys, who will be the 7th generation.
Uh-huh.
And farming mental health is very important to me because I think it's a group that people don't think about because farmers are so resilient and so work ethic driven that you don't see them in their down parts, So.
And they're not maybe always comfortable letting that part of them show?
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Connie being a board member and then, as she says, involved personally with farming to the 6th generation and hopefully 7th, she, some years ago, approached me and just said, David, we need to do more. We need to do better. We were doing some things, but we needed to do more and better. So as this episode is laying out, there's a lot of factors, a lot of stressors, a lot of unpredictables, a lot of unknowns. So one of the things we thought we could do better as a board is to at least provide better, clearer, accessible information to the farmer and the ag community about what services are available. And Connie, you've talked about maybe just strategies on how do we get to these folks. I mentioned in the podcast episode about it's not probably realistic to expect a farmer to come into a traditional clinic or an office, right? So maybe tell the audience a little bit about some of the brainstorming we've done of how can we get this information and the resources to the farmer rather than expecting them to come into our offices.
Yes. Well, with the generosity of the board, over the past couple of years, we have been able to provide handouts, which I try to take to like Centera, Tractor Supply, Loudonville Equity, just to get the information out because we have to go where they are.
Yes.
Like you said, they're not going to come find us.
Yep.
And it's very important to whatever kind of group that we can go, like the Farm Bureau breakfast that we just had. That's an avenue, but not everybody's a Farm Bureau member.
Right.
So whether it's through the Ashland County Fair, 4-H, whatever, we do have a lot of resources out there. And just trying to meet them where they're at. And that's what I'm also trying to figure out how I can improve and do better this year.
Yeah. And you mentioned, the fair. I mean, I know that's upcoming, and I believe you told me that it's the 175th year of the fair.
I think so. I think that they were planning a parade, I think, in August or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's really good. And a lot of farmers, young, old, love the fair.
Yeah.
And so it's a good place to get the information out. And even if they're not experiencing something, they probably know a neighbor who is going through some hard times. I just, as we had talked in the past, I've seen so many little farms being sold.
Yes.
And it's so sad because, a lot of farmers rent ground. And so, it may be 70, 80 acres, but still that's an impact on what they would be expecting to use to grow. And it's sad also because the farmers are getting probably good money for it because farmland is pretty, pricey. So it's good because they're getting the money, they can pay off their bills, and they're set. However, it's an impact that's going to impact us for years to come.
Sure. And again, I have to wonder because as I've said on this episode, it is a calling in the true sense of that word, a vocation. In when maybe somebody's not able to do that, I wonder about their mental and emotional health, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, again, without names, but do you know what some of these farmers are doing now that they maybe sold off the land? I mean, are they working somebody else's farm? I mean, what are they doing with their time?
I really don't know personally, but I mean, I've just heard in general conversations, some are, working off the farm because they have a steady income, they have insurance, et cetera. And some are just retired.
Yeah.
So, because, a lot of our farmers are older and they are hoping to pass it off to the family, but that may not happen.
Sure.
So it's just it's a difficult situation. It's sad because, like I said, it's going to affect us, maybe not this year or next, but in 5, 10, 15 years down the road when we don't have the land to do what we need to do with it, whether it's growing crops, raising cattle, whatever.
Right, because not all of the farmland that's sold is sold to people that are going to continue to use it as farmland.
No,
so as you say,
that's a sad thing.
Right.
I mean, I look personally in my experience, growing up on my farm, my dad had to sell some property because he didn't have insurance. My mom was very ill. And so we had to sell some, and that turned into housing, which makes me sad. But what else do you do?
Right.
So.
And again, you raise another point that I wonder about. You mentioned 6th and maybe 7th generation. So, play this out with me, Connie. So the current farmer today, with all the challenges we've talked about in this episode, all the unpredictabilities, all the financial, all the stress, right? Mm-hmm. And then knowing that, and then thinking about their sons and daughters and about, do they urge them to take on and take up, everything that they know and, versus saying to them, you know what, I love you. If you want to do this, great. But you know what? Maybe they're, you know what I mean? This just seems like it would be a dilemma for the parent, right?
It is. I know a couple farmers that, it was more or less expected that the kids are going to take it over.
Right.
But when the kid said, no, I want a job off the farm, it's a big issue. But, it's hard because a lot of young people may not want to do this because they want a steady income. But I think it's something you kind of have to touch and go. I'm the one farmer I know, his son had worked off the farm and is now coming back. So I think they have to have that experience, and then you got to have the desire and also the resilience, again, to be able to make it.
Yeah. And, in terms of moving forward, we talked about connections on this episode and the importance of being a good neighbor and asking, like you said, just that simple question, how are you really doing? And being there for your fellow farmers wherever you might see them. And it's okay to ask those questions. But, Connie, when you look at this with your experience, should we, and I know we do, but, there is hope for our farmers. And I think I just want you to say that because I think it carries more weight. Yeah,
there is hope. And I think overall in the world, we've seen how mental health has changed so much over the last 10 years. Everybody's more acceptable of it. Everybody's okay if I need medication or counseling, it's okay. Just to get that through to the rural community, farmers, hey, it's okay.
Right.
I've been reading at different counties here in Ohio that are trying to reach out, and I just think it's just something we got to continue doing and providing that hope. They will do well. We just got to help them along the way.
Yeah. Well, Connie Butler, I appreciate your efforts so much. And I know that they're not going to stop. This is not a one-off, as you said.
No.
We sometimes say this is a concerted, ongoing effort, a focus area of the board and our contract providers, Appleseed, Catholic Charities, and Acada. And we do have some therapists at those agencies that are farm-friendly therapists.
Yes,
these are people that they themselves have grown up in a farming community or are very farm-adjacent, and they want to work with farmers. So I say all that to say that if anybody listening, if your loved one or yourself, you do go to one of our agencies, it's okay when you're going through the intake process to say, hey, you got anybody else? You got anybody here that understands farming? And just say that. And that's important for you to say because we do have some people like that. But if it's not mentioned during the intake process, they won't necessarily route you to somebody.
I know myself and a couple of the other counselors or whatever have gone through the program through OSU.
Yeah.
The farm stress, which is very good.
Right.
And they're always giving us, refreshers on that. But yes, it's important to get that one person who understands you, and please don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, and again, as Connie said, Connie's a social worker. Imagine, coming into an agency where Connie might be working, and if you're a farmer and talking to her versus somebody like me, a city boy, it's going to be a very different conversation, Connie. And I think that they're going to feel much more relaxed, comfortable, heard, and seen by somebody like you versus me. So that I don't want folks to hesitate to ask for that from the get-go. But also, I want them to know that those people exist because we have a lot of folks, especially, again, Ashland County is a rural county in a lot of ways. So it's not surprising that a lot of our counselors and social workers at our agencies have that background either in their family or really close by and are very familiar. And again, as you said, we've encouraged them to take additional coursework to become more and more familiar. So, well, Connie, we will talk about this subject more and more, but I'm glad you made some time today to come in to talk about our efforts, not only on things like the breakfast that just occurred, but also the upcoming fairs, and you're getting out there whenever you can, whether it's 4-H or other meetings, to spread the word about what's available and that help and hope's available. So thank you so much, Connie, for all you're doing.
No problem. Thank you for inviting me. It's been my pleasure, and I hope that we can continue providing services for the farmers.
Thank you, Connie.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Keeping Ashland Healthy podcast. The podcast is a production of the Mental Health and Recovery Board of Ashland County, Ohio. You can reach the board by calling 419-281-3139. Please remember that the board funds a local 24/7 crisis line through Appleseed Community Mental Health Center. It can be reached by calling 419-289-6111. That's 419-289-6111. Until next time, please join us in Keeping Ashland Healthy.